Hey everyone, welcome to Architects of Imagination, a game dev podcast where we talk to the brilliant minds behind your favorite video games. Today, it is my pleasure to introduce Mr. Dave Chan. How you doing, Dave?
Good. I'm doing good.
Awesome. Thanks for coming on. Dave has quite a legendary career, if I could say that. He's working on, and this is going to take a minute because there's a lot of a lot of awesome games that Dave's had a hand in, from Mass Effect to Prey, MDK2, Neverwinter Nights 2, Splinter Cell Double Agent, Baldur's Gate 2, Uncharted 3, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, Knights of the Fallen Empire, Knights of the Eternal Thread, Skylanders, Imaginators, Far Cry Instincts, Predator, and Uncharted: The Lost Legacy. And that's just some, I don't know, maybe half-ish of the games you've worked on, a whole bunch more. Those are some of the bigger ones. Wow, awesome career, Dave.
Oh, thanks.
You've been on some pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, I definitely feel privileged to have worked on a lot of really nice franchises, stuff that I enjoy playing myself.
That's always fun. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes you work on games that are, you're,
That you leave off your credits list.
yeah.
Yeah. Been there.
Uh, Sometimes, at GDC, one topic that comes up from time to time is like who worked on the worst thing, or the lowest rated, or the most embarrassing. I don't know.
Yeah.
Let's start with that. Do you have a?
You know, most of the stuff that I would probably categorize in that is would be my mobile games.
Okay.
There's some that were good, but there are some that were just, you know, like I said, I won't even put them on my credits list. It's not so much that they were bad. They were just low budget. They hire you at the last minute because they need some kind of sound, and you don't have any sort of investment or real understanding of the game, so you just do your best. Um, but I I would say that there is a love hate for some of the titles I worked on. Um, MDK2, I worked on a little bit on BG, but I actually came on so late in the original BG that I basically was just doing QA stuff. Um, and my first full project was MDK2, and yeah, that got bad. That like towards the end, we were doing like 16-hour days, 6 7 days a week, death march crunch. So I mean, I love the end result, but yeah, that was very trying on my mental health and my relationships and everything. But yeah,
Yeah, and most of us in the industry that have been doing this a long time have had experiences like that. That is not unusual. Unfortunately, I know, it's hard for me to play a Call of Duty game these days after
yeah,
being in there a decade. And there was the best of times, the worst of times, right? I had a ton of fun on a lot of them, and then at the end, it was kind of a death march. So, yeah, it's just like it brings up not good feelings
yeah,
these
yeah.
days
It's kind of triggering. Yeah.
a little bit. Yeah.
Well,
Um,
it's funny. I don't um, like those games that I worked on that I did a bunch of crunch. I didn't touch them for years, and then I went back and I tried to play with a non-critical ear because if you let it happen, you'll sit there and go, "Oh crap, I should have changed this." And, oh, that still bugs me and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, you can eventually, but yeah, there is that remembering the 3 o'clock in the morning and all you wanted to do was go home, and you're waiting for the next build, and you're just bone tired.
yeah. I got to the point where I found myself a new sleep pattern where I had a couch next to my desk at work, and I'll caveat this: no one forced me to do this. No one
Yeah,
even asked me to. It was just you know what the deadline is, and
yeah,
you kind of self do it. But yeah, I got to the point where I was kind of working all night, and when I found 2 3 a.m. whatever, when my body just kind of like, when you when you're driving and you're tired and it's just like keeping your eyes open is just
yep,
like painful to do.
Yeah.
Whenever I was working late and found myself doing that, I was able to. Here's my little new habit. I would crash on my couch. I would lay down. I'd set an alarm on my phone so I didn't sleep the whole night for like. And I came to know it was either an 8, 12, or 15-minute nap. Those were the three
Yeah.
iterations. And I knew like how tired I was and which of those it was. And almost every time I would wake myself up with a snore 1 minute before that timer went off. And that was enough to just kind of like reset me. I'd go to
Yeah.
the Coke, I'd walk around for a minute, and then and yeah, I would keep going into the night, and that's not healthy.
No kidding. Yeah, I would generally. I don't remember, except for maybe a quick cat nap. I fortunately didn't sleep in my office. Mind you, I didn't have a couch. There were couches around, but yeah, my general rule is it's either a 10-minute nap or a 90-minute nap because anything in between, I wake up just so groggy, headache, and everything. So, but yeah, you get to the point when you're working that late where it's diminishing returns, right?
Yeah,
Like
it is.
you start making mistakes, and we see it in all the disciplines. Like, you know, you go in one day and you update your project and you fire it up and everything's crashing and everything's broken and you're like, oh, what the? And then you look and somebody did a check-in at 4 in the morning and you go, oh, okay.
Broken
So
bill.
one of the programmers did something and broke everything. Yeah. So, first thing they do is first thing in the morning, an announcement goes out. Hey, everybody, we're doing a rollback. It was this that caused the problem, but hopefully you won't lose any work. Yada yada. So
Oh man.
fun stuff.
Yeah, and like later and with more experience, you come to understand like it feels good to like okay, I'm going home, I've pushed hard, I want to check in and like
Yeah.
thing accomplished, right? But it is so much smarter to just check that in the morning.
Yeah. Yeah. Do a reality check. Just say, was the stuff that I did last night as good as I thought it was? It's like when you're like really drunk and you think you've come up with like a really deep thought, and then the next day you're like, what was I thinking? You
Yeah.
know? Yeah.
I just had one of those. I was like, "Oh my goodness, I just figured out a new way to channel pack using HDR and like holy shit, I'm going to have to do a talk on this." No, I didn't think it all through. That didn't work.
Yeah.
So,
But yeah, I find that you know you get, especially in this part of the industry, and I'm sure people have a lot of names for it. I think today from the company I'm working for, the boss said he wanted people to listen to something because he was getting Spocky, and I'm like, Spocky? You mean like Spock, Star Trek Spock? And I guess that's sort of their thing for like ear fatigue or whatever. And that's kind of the way I look at it. Like, you really have to sort of walk away sometimes because all starts sounding like mush. So yeah.
yeah. So I think we forgot to mention at the beginning of the show what exactly it is you do. So tell
Oh
us
yeah.
tell us what your job title is, what that entails.
Well, for most of my career, I've been doing audio. I don't do music. Music I do just for myself for fun, but I don't do it professionally, partly because I suck at it.
Yeah,
Um,
me too.
yeah, but really, like sound effects. I've been fortunate enough to work with. I do like voice direction, voice casting. The downside, doing a lot of voice editing. Yeah, some of those projects that you mentioned there. My job was as a contractor was to go through and clean up like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of lines, and it gets to the point where you know I'll see if I can fix this line by stealing a syllable from this line.
Oh man.
Yeah, it gets that it
Sure.
gets that nitpicky, but yeah. So implementation, like actually putting the stuff in the game. These days, it's been less about putting stuff directly in the game engine and more about putting it in middleware like Wise or what have you.
Yeah.
But there's still some, if you're working on a mobile project, some small iOS or Android game, chances are you're probably not going to be using middleware. You're just going to be using the tools or whatever's in the engine, Unreal or Unity or what have you. So yeah, I've also worn a few other hats. Being in smaller companies, I was in charge. There was a lighting solution we were working on way back when, and I was kind of the product manager for that. But yeah, lately my big change is I do this stuff as my day gig, and me and some good friends are working on starting our own studio.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, so yeah, so much paperwork, so much, like people often say, well, I've got this great game idea. Like, do you want to hear it? And I'm like, not really, because you know what? The idea is just such a small part of the whole thing. It's
Yeah.
all about, and that's where we are right now, right? It's like, okay, this is a cool idea, but how do we actually make that work? You know? So.
Yeah. Interesting. Do you guys have a name for this new endeavor yet?
Yeah, this it's going to be Giant Sandbox Studios, and so there's two titles that we've kind of got in the mix. One is kind of a psychological horror game.
Okay.
So, and we think it's sort of different than anything else we've seen. Doesn't mean it'll do well, but we're hoping. Yeah, and so I'm fortunate enough to my main partners right now, Stephen Blomkamp, he's out of Vancouver, and Charles Singletary Jr., he's out of Texas. So it's kind of, that's the reality of things nowadays. Hey, everybody working remotely.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. Yeah, we're an all remote company too. Speaking of that too, you're are you live in Canada now? Are you American citizen or are you
Nope, nope.
Canadian?
I've always been Canadian. So,
Okay, cool. um, so we talked about worst of times. Let's talk about best of times a little bit. What are can you talk about some of the favorite games that you've worked on or yeah.
yeah, sure. There's not to be too cliched, but there's quite a few. I really enjoyed the end results of a game like Knights of the Old Republic. I really Prey was this is the original Prey, not the new one.
Yeah.
It was really fun and challenging. I was hired on by Ed Lima, and it was weird because I was basically the weapons guy, and all of the weapons I had never done anything like this before. They were a combination of like science fiction and organic. So you had guns that would move and writhe and make weird noises, and the grenades were these little creatures with three legs, and you pull one of the legs off and it screams, and you throw it and it would blow up. Yeah, so that was a lot of fun too. I was fortunate enough to work on some expansions for Neverwinter and do everything like all the casting, all the voice direction. That was really fun. I really enjoy working with actors, which is what my latest gig is. I'm a dialogue supervisor, so yeah, I just my job as a director for VO is just to basically try to bring the best performance out and also try to um, do what the writer designer was saying in their head. Because a lot of times those guys won't be in the session, so if they aren't there, then I have to kind of just go by the notes.
Yeah. Let's talk about that a little bit. I know this came up at Infinity Ward a few times where because of I think like SAG rules or something like that, I don't know if there's a different union for voiceover
Yeah, in
actors.
Canada it's called ACTRA.
Okay,
Yeah,
I
there's sister
remember
organizations. So
there was certain we weren't allowed to have certain people on the set, which we always found kind of weird. That was just some of the like union rules. Like, what do you mean we
yeah,
can't have the guys making the game writing the stuff on the
yeah.
set? What?
Yeah, and you know what? That's changed a lot over the years because what happened was you get, and I've talked to Actor a few times, and they were actually pretty good about sort of modifying the way that they do things because they understood that they didn't understand video games,
Yeah.
and so they would talk to developers and then sort of say, okay, will this work and will that. So they did things like developing a lower rate schedule. TV shows have residuals and stuff like that. Video games don't really have that. Like, we don't have the infrastructure to pay an actor for a game that they did 5 years ago, right? So the buyouts would be a little bit larger, but then there wouldn't be that overhead there, and rules about the number of performances you can ask for an actor to do in a day, the number of characters, and things like that. Yeah, unions have, and I understand why they're in place because there's a lot of abuse, and honestly, most of the projects I've worked on have been non-union, when I've had the hand in casting and directing and stuff like that. But I've always tried to sort of adhere to that sort of philosophy, because if you don't take care of the voice talent, then you'll get bad performances. They won't want to work with you again, that sort of thing. So I always try to make it an enjoyable environment. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of rules, but they have come a long way from when I first started, working with voice actors.
Yeah, that's good. I'm glad to hear that it's changing because I think like a lot of the union rules are sort of set up designed around the film and TV industry where they've
Yeah,
been doing work forever, and just like tacking that onto games, it's like, well, there's some things that
yeah, yeah,
don't work
exactly.
the same way.
Like, the character things, like the character limit, you can only do like 4 or 5 characters in a day, and if you do more, you have to pay more and stuff like that. And in a video game, you could have someone that you want to do, like, all the incidental characters that you run into, like in an RPG or something like that.
Yeah.
You just have like one or two little lines. So, or barks, like, in GTA, when, hey, watch out. Um, you don't want to sit there and hire like 20 different people. If you can get 4 different people to do 5 different voices, and then no one's really going to even notice if they do them distinctly enough. But yeah, union rules kind of interfere with stuff like that sometimes.
Yeah, I remember our guy Justin. We wanted on the set. He was the guy on the inside that used to do all of our like temp voices for Captain Price, and he had a good voice, and he was kind of like one of the writers too for the game. So they wanted him on set. They wanted him to do, I think, some character work too, like
Oh,
for the
really?
shipping
Okay.
game. In the end, yeah, he was good at it, and so I think they had to run around all kinds of like shenanigans to get him like SAG a SAG card. He'd won, yeah, I don't know. It was
Yeah. One of my good friends is Mark Meir. He started, obviously, he's Commander Shepard, and he's done so much stuff since then. But
yeah, yeah,
um, I was like the first one to bring him in for voice acting. He was a big fixture in the theater community, especially the improv community in Edmonton, where they have every August the big Fringe Festival, and tens of thousands of people come out to see plays and stuff like that. So we brought him in to do some lines for a cut scene, the final cut scene for Baldur's Gate. But yeah, like, you have to like get permission to use a non-union actor, and you have to get all these things signed and everything. And once again, a lot easier now than it used to be. But yeah, there's definitely like they want to keep the non-union people down to a minimum. So, but
yeah.
yeah, I mean, I really, my big thing about directing, and I can hear what you're saying, if you have the writer there and stuff like that, one thing I always tried to do with, people that were in the session, because it's my philosophy, is don't read the line. So what that means is, like, if there's like a line where, somebody's angry and they say, I really hate that guy and we're going to get him. I'm a horrible actor. But you don't actually, for me, don't read that line. Say something similar, because the minute you start reading the actual dialogue on the page, the actor gets that in their head. Oh, I have to exactly imitate what he just did. And so you want to actually give the actor, the liberty to sort of bring their own voice and their own character to it. So I basically would just make up a line that was similar, and say that to them. Hey, I want it like this, stuff like that. So yeah, and yeah, voice acting is great. The big thing is that a lot of people think they can do it, but the minute you get them behind a microphone, yeah,
Big joke.
yeah, well, yeah, and and that was one thing that I know. There's like some people will be derisive about this, but the improv actors that we used, which was, now a lot of those people in Edmonton have worked on like a ton of Bioware games, so they know what's expected. Your efforts, your pain, your grunts, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But the great thing about them is that early days, and it still happens now, where you have like a spreadsheet of lines. Okay, this line you're extremely happy. This line you're ungodly sad. Your best friend just died, and they're right after the one after the other. And I found that people who did improv were actually able to, change on a dime like that because they were used to it. Because on stage they had to do it all the time, right, in real time. You couldn't like take a minute and say, okay, just let me get into character. You had to actually, change on the fly.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I've had impulses for like, oh man, it'd be fun to do voice acting, and I know Mark Meir also from the Dungeons and Dragons community. He plays
Yeah.
a lot of D&D, and so do I. I run a ton of games, so I'm doing voices like all the time. But I actually have one bit in the, let's see, Modern Warfare 2. I got to do a bunch of exertion stuff for Ghosts, or no, not for Ghosts, for Soap. Yeah,
Okay.
that was a lot of fun. Um,
Yeah, I've done stuff, but it's mostly like creature stuff, where I will go in and process my voice a ton. Um, the one that I did pretty well, all of it was the first mobile game I worked on, and it was actually pretty successful for its time. It was called Office Jerk. It was just one of those paper toss things, but instead of getting into a waste basket, you were actually throwing stuff at a coworker.
yeah.
So I did all the reactions for that, and then I just pitched my voice up so nobody would recognize it.
Awesome, awesome. Do you have any uh, advice, tips, or anything for someone who is interested in getting into voice acting for games?
Yeah, I would say like look at going to acting classes, of course, but also look at getting some improv training. It's very much like a think on your feet sort of situation because you're in the studio. It costs money to be in the studio, and a lot of times you'll have writers put something on paper, and it sounds really good to them, but they don't have it read by anyone. Get in the studio and the person says it and they go, "Wow, this is really awkward." So
Yeah.
you're rewriting it on the fly, right? So yeah, that's where a lot of the improv experience comes in. Is that and I highly recommend that too. Like, just basically get some lines from a game or something like that, or write your own, and just record them, have somebody listen to them and give you some feedback. That always helps as well.
Yeah, awesome. How much should one have in a reel too? Does it should I should you have four voices or
I think honestly, um, there's a tendency to like, oh, I can do cartoons, I can do drama, I can do, and I think your best bet for me anyway when I listen is play to your strengths. If you do some characters really well, like if you do some accents really well, great. Put those in there. If you have some that are borderline or not great, don't put them in there. Like
yeah.
just because you say you can do Russian doesn't mean you can do Russian. So, um, but overall, I think just keep it to the character types that you can do
Well,
well, and
yeah.
then if you get the gig or audition for the gig and they ask you to, can you do this version or can you do something like that, then you can kind of stretch your legs.
Okay.
But if you just one of these people that just has like 30 different voice demos on the same thing, it's kind of like after a while, once again, ear fatigue, right? I'm listening to this person, I'm going, wait, did they have a good, kid voice? I can't remember anymore, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Is it helpful? Does it matter? Is it a down if you have video in there? Say you captured clips from a video game and did like replaced the voices with
Oh,
your.
I see what you're saying. I wouldn't necessarily do that, because you're basically, it would be like going in and dubbing, try to dub over Robin Williams doing the genie, right?
Yeah.
It's like no matter what you do, everyone is going to hear Robin Williams and not you.
Yeah.
Um, so if you want to record video, I would record video of your own performance, your own capture. So because nowadays, for some projects, you're doing facial capture as well as doing voiceover at the same time. So if you show that you have like the type of emotive face that somebody wants for a project, then that might be an advantage for you.
Okay. Cool. Um, let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about the of the types of tasks that you've got in your job, from being on set to dialogue editing to sound design. You mentioned you like working with actors. That's great. I'm guessing between like sound design and dialogue editing, do you have a preference? Which is more fun to you?
I kind of like alternating. Sorry, I just got to
Okay.
realize I had a cat here. Um, I find that when I do a lot of dialogue stuff, I start craving doing sound effects,
Yeah.
and vice versa. So, but when push comes to shove, like if I had to do something for the rest of my life, I think I might go with dialogue. I think I might go with voice stuff because just it's the chance to work with different people. It's super creative, um, and yeah, there's just a lot of flexibility there. When you're doing sound effects, it's a little more rigid. I mean, there are definitely open sort of like you can take this sound anywhere you want it to go, but you also have to sort of get it into the zone that the developer's looking for. And some developers are really good at describing what they want for a sound, and some aren't. So you end up doing like four or five, retakes of the same sound because they quite can't quite communicate what they want. So yeah, that's a challenge. But yeah, I mean, given the option, I would probably do the VO stuff. So
Okay. Now, one funny thing you're talking about communicating what is wanted. You'll find this in pretty much every effects department in any video game company. We are always describing our work by doing sound effects with our voices and our hands. So
yeah,
like, okay, you got a spell. We need a little build up. It's gonna go, and then like the
yeah,
little projectile,
yeah, yeah,
and that's kind of like when we talk about like the if we're critiquing someone's work and we're talking about the timing of it, how long the buildup needs to be, it is helpful to just like verbally express it. It kind of cuts through because like it's weird to describe things in terms of like, okay, well, it's 0.35 seconds now, and it should be, I think, point two. Like I don't know, I don't know like like the number, but it's pretty clear. I mean, you can even record it in like, okay, the buildup is that part of it.
hmm
I don't know. That's something that's kind of funny, and we joke about quite a bit.
yeah, and that's something that I try to encourage as well because you have a lot of people who are going to be kind of shy about doing that, you know. But I always try to say like, just tell me what you hear in your head. If you have to like make weird noises or whatever, that's totally fine. That helps me get a reference, right? It's so much better than, especially clients that it's not so much anymore. But when I was first starting out, video chat wasn't really a thing, so I would just get a spreadsheet with like just text descriptions and you know an amazing fireball sound with a big whoosh. Okay, that's pretty open ended.
Yeah, you don't know what it's going to look like. So that's when, you got to get it in the game. You got to play test your work and see like, oh, no, the context is totally off.
Yeah,
It's got to be a little sizzle, not a not a concussive burst thing, or whatever.
Yeah,
Whether or not it loops might not be well communicated.
exactly.
Um, so I think about I've got a couple of gripes. Maybe that's I don't know if that's the right word with game audio, and I want to bend your ear about it a little bit.
Sure.
There's two things that every time I run into them, I'm like, oh damn it. One is 3D audio in headphones.
Mm,
I feel like it is wrong every time.
yeah.
And here's what I mean. When you do 3D spatial audio and you're sitting in a room, like I have a 7.1 system over here, and like you have a nice system, you want to hear it, you want to oh, there's a fountain there that loops, and I'll like slowly turn and like, yay, it's panning around my speakers. But when that happens in headphones, so say you're on a PlayStation multiplayer game and you have headphones in, it'll pan it to this one ear, and it just feels so wrong because that's
Yeah.
not what happens, right? Your ear doesn't get none of the sound on the other side. It should
Yeah.
get some. And from back in the day, I studied audio engineering and stuff. It's like even like coming to learn about how the human brain like echolocates, not echolocates, but like determines direction. It has to
Hmm.
do with the phase shift difference between when the sound hits the ear. It has to do with how the head itself kind of like filters it very slightly, and your brain is interpreting those things. So I don't know. That bugs me every time. Is that something you've thought about? I don't. This is
Oh,
probably
absolutely. Yeah, the issue there is that when they're doing those types of things, you are basically using a generic HRTF, which is the head response transfer model. And what that is that um, if you are fortunate enough, you can actually go out and get tested and have a specific transfer function made for your head, your ear shape, and stuff like that. And so things sound amazingly better when you have a specific custom HRTF, but obviously they can't do that. So they kind of go with like an average. And for some people that'll work, some people that won't. And what you're talking about, there's a lot of audio engines that don't position right. Like, yeah, I don't know. You've probably experienced this. That it's super annoying thing when you're playing in headphones, where something's in front of you, and you turn just a little bit, and all of a sudden it pans over like
yeah.
immediately, and you're like, "Ah." Yeah. So that's the engine, and once again, it's getting better, but there's definitely not as much polish put into the audio in a lot of projects than there is in the video, which is too bad because I mean you can be argued, you know, anywhere from 30 to 50% of the experience is audio,
Yeah.
and it just doesn't get it the resources. One thing that I think can really alleviate that, and more companies do this, fortunately, especially AAA. You know, smaller studios might not have the resources, but they do a mixing session, right? So they'll basically go into an actual studio. They'll plug in the console or the PC, and they'll play the game and listen to it critically from that point of view. And some of the tools now will actually let you do like real time adjustments as you're playing. So you'll think, okay, yeah, that actually works for most situations. You know, unfortunately, unlike movies where it's all static, like if I position like you said, a fountain over here, I know exactly where it's going to be every time because that's all set in stone with the soundtrack. But for video games, you don't know where the person's going to be looking. You don't know what they're going to be doing. Are they going to be firing a gun? Are they going to be having a conversation? So yeah, it's a bit of a challenge, and I think it's something that is improving in some ways because people now have consoles that are hooked up to even sound bars nowadays. Like you can get decent sound bars with a subwoofer and that kind of do semi decent surround. But yeah, it is a challenge. It's definitely something that is not evolving as fast as I'd like to see.
Yeah. I've wondered too if it's a function of like the, the console, like the audio engine. Like if I'm on my PlayStation and I plug in my headphones, like, is it or is it not? I assume not. Switching to a different mode, because like,
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. I don't know. Like in the old days, remember we used to have to like go in and manually set stuff in like DOS and stuff like that. But
yeah,
most games now will have an option in the audio setting to say, what are you listening to this on? A TV, a surround system, headphones, and they'll use that to determine how the mixing engine works.
yeah,
But not everybody does that. So yeah, it's hit and miss.
bummer. So
Yeah,
my other gripe is that not too long ago upgraded my sound system from a 5.1 to a 7.1, and super excited to try it out. There's almost nothing that is mixed in 7.1. Games,
yeah.
Blu-rays, like, I was bummed. I found, I think I don't remember if I found nothing or just like the minimal, like, so what is the movie that won the audio Oscar? Well, Master and Commander, I think it was, with Russell Crowe, had phenomenal audio. It's like, yeah, that's gonna be awesome on my 7.1. I put it on. It's not mixed. It's 7.1. I mean, it was for the theater. Like, that's just a bummer that the next to nothing supports 7.1.
Yeah. I mean, video games are a little bit different because everything is mixed in real time. Actually, that was funny because many, many years ago, Dolby sponsored me to go to the Audio Engineering Society's conference in Toronto, and the topic that year was surround. And when I got up and did my talk, like these older people who'd been in the industry for many many years, when I tried to explain to them that no, we don't have big Dolby encoding systems and stuff like that. We just in real time, we say where's this object, and it's in the back, so we feed it to the back speakers and stuff like that. They couldn't grasp that that's how it works. But yeah, if you have if it's streaming out of the console, let's say, and the console only supports 5.1, then that's what's going to be reported. And so what happens is that your system will just say, okay, well, we'll just fill in these other speakers with, whatever, right? Just basically trying to sort of make it as best as possible. So, yeah, consoles I think are a little bit behind on that. PC is a little bit better in terms of the flexibility of being able to set, specifically how many channels you have.
Yeah, yeah. I know one thing I got wrong in my surround sound setup for, I don't know, a couple of decades was that I thought the surround speakers, the two, so if you have 5.1, there's, one center,
Yeah,
left and right channel, and I thought the other two went kind of like behind you. They don't. If you look at like proper diagrams, they go to your sides.
yeah, yeah. And it's interesting when you go to like a real surround mixing theater. I was fortunate enough one year to get to go to Skywalker and do the tour and everything. Sorry, I should say Skywalker Sound outside of San Francisco. And yeah, like where they have everything set up is not necessarily where you would put it in your home theater system, right? And you're like, oh, okay, so that's how they're treating it. And if you take it home and you put your stuff in the the wrong place, then yeah, it's definitely not the experience that it was mixed for.
Yeah, interesting. Speaking of Skywalker sound, I don't know if this is true. Maybe it was sales jargon nonsense, but these are M&K speakers. I don't know if you're familiar with
Yeah,
Miller Kysell.
yeah.
I was told that Skywalker Ranch uses M&K speakers in their mixing booths.
It's entirely possible. Believe me, I was so
Yeah,
starstruck to be there that
totally.
I, I didn't pay much attention to the gear, like the mixing consoles and stuff like that. I did, and of course everything nowadays runs on Pro Tools and all that.
Yeah,
But yeah, I think like most good places, they have a variety of mixing studios, so you can, because it doesn't make sense for them just to mix for the best. Like, we'll assume that the
yeah,
theater has like the most up to date, best sound system that they have. And then, you go to a theater that has like less, fewer channels, doesn't have the Atmos stuff, and it won't sound as good. So any good mixer will always take their mix and listen to it on multiple not sources, but output devices.
Yeah.
So if you don't do that, then yeah, you run into the danger. Like even like I remember MDK2 is the first console game I worked on, and it was just, we said, well, how big of a difference can it be between, this TV and that TV? And there were huge differences. So you end up making compromises to make it sound good on, as many units as you can. But I was blown away. I had no idea at that time.
Yeah, totally. Man, I can't stand it when I go to the movies and it's not loud. Oh,
Yeah. Like
I
that's the thing
I
is
will
they've
get
got,
up and go tell the manager, "Can you please turn this up?" I will
yeah,
Karen
because
out.
they have such a dynamic range, right? Like nowadays you could have like a pin drop and then an explosion. And yeah, a lot of these places will just like have everything just very dynamically compressed.
Yeah, that's a bummer. Let's talk for a minute about some future stuff. You
Sure.
mentioned using sort of AI for like placeholder dialogue, and the topic has come up quite a lot on, the ethics of AI. Are people going to be out of work? Is it going to
Yeah, yeah.
supplement people, or is it going to replace people? Talk to us a little bit about how you're using AI generated voices and just some of those dynamics that are at play with it.
Yeah. Basically, our sort of approach right now is we're using AI for prototyping. And the idea is like right now we're using a service and we're just using their stock voices. But there will come a point where we've done the casting, but we're not quite ready to bring people into the studio. And the idea is that we're going to have them go in and record a bunch of different lines, happy, sad, angry, and use those lines to train the AI so that when we do dump out, some AI generated voiceover, that it actually sounds close to what the actor will sound like. And they will be paid for that. And then we will bring them in for the final recording session. And that seems to me to be kind of a win-win, because then we have the flexibility of trying out different lines without going through the expense of bringing somebody in to record, but they also get paid for doing the training and they also get paid for the performance at the end. Unfortunately, yes, there are definitely some people out there who are just going to use AI to replace actors, and I'm guaranteeing that a lot of those will not be good quality because it's very difficult to have that nuance, right?
Yeah, yeah. Our buddy, I think you know him as well, Travis Baldry, who made the leap from video games to uh, uh, doing audiobooks. He's an audiobook narrator and now a writer. And he had an interesting post recently talking about that. How he had an AI generate his own dialogue a little bit from the book, and then he himself read it, and it was passable by the AI. It sounded like a realistic voice, but like just like the intent of the words, like some of the just like the meaning, the feeling, like all of that was just totally missing from it. And
Yeah.
so, sure, you can save some time and money and have a lesser performance from AI. I wonder though, like how. I mean, we're in that very early stages, though. It's going to get better. I wonder if
Yeah.
that kind of
It's
content.
definitely going to get better. It'll be able to read context from the actual line, and maybe the lines around it. But I think it's just like animation, right? Like, we do facial capture and stuff like that. But even then, even after they do facial capture, animators will go in and tweak stuff, right? Because maybe something was too extreme or not extreme enough or what have you. So there's always that element of like having the human hand in there, understanding what is technically correct versus what is creatively correct. I think though, and this is just wild speculation, my theory is that GTA 6 will use AI voice generation for all the crowd stuff, because a big issue, and we've all seen it, like love Skyrim, but you hear the same, the
Yeah,
same villager 10 times over. You're just like,
an arrow in my leg.
yeah, yeah. That took an arrow to the knee, but
Yeah,
it's just it's immersion breaking, right?
yeah,
So if you can actually, for things that don't matter as much, I think those are probably appropriate places. Like, when you're driving down the street and or you get out and you're like shooting up some place or whatever, and it's like, hey, that's my favorite convenience store or something like that, right?
yeah.
And you don't want to bother recording those lines, but if you could actually get something generated in the cloud, say, okay, players right by the 7-Eleven clone, and this is what you want people around there to say, right? That could make a difference in terms of immersion. But when it comes to main characters, I don't see it happening anytime soon. So
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting too. Like, just think about, you know, most AI machine learning models are not. I don't know of any yet that are real time viable, but my assumption is that's. I don't know if there's like the processing power, the cloud resources it takes to do that. But one move that we have been seeing is that we sort of design games with a machine in mind, right? You've got
mhm.
a CPU and a GPU, and you budget time for the audio to process, time for the animations and effects. And going back as far as like Crackdown 3, when they were talking about like the Xbox since last generation had cloud resources that
Yeah,
that were available to it. And so it seems maybe this is the kind of thing that's perfect for it. And I think one of the limiters here is stuff that is latency sensitive. So like if it has to happen like now, if it's like next frame that you need a result, but you kind of don't with dialogue. You could
yeah,
people pause for a beat. That like, okay, send something up, chat GPT it, give me AI voice dialogue
yeah,
box, and have it come back. That kind of thing maybe doesn't need to be local to your machine.
yeah. Um, yeah, exactly. Like I remember the big announcement of Crackdown, where they were going to use cloud computing to do all the physics stuff. The buildings falling apart and stuff like that. To a certain extent, that's fine. But yeah, you're right. Like if I'm like driving down the road really fast and I run into a fence, I don't want it to take like 25 milliseconds before it actually
Right.
the stuff actually shows the impact, because that'll just feel really weird. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely going to be problems. Like, what if you can't connect to the internet? Are all the players going to be mute? Or sorry, all the NPCs going to be mute? Yeah, there's definitely challenges, but I can also see um, opportunities to help with immersion. And I think it's just like the record industry, like rebelled against MP3s and everything like that. It's just going to have to take a sort of a sea change. It's going to have to like be something that works well and is good enough to make everybody happy in terms of like not stealing jobs, not but still producing a quality product.
Yeah, too. I think about you know replacement versus supplement too, right? Replacing people and what if some of these missing elements, right? We talked about the nuance in a performance. What if like the tools you're using, you the guiding hand are now rather than like actually chopping up audio or like inserting curves of like okay happy here and then
Hmm.
confused or something like that. So yeah, I don't know. There's it's an interesting time. Things are
Yeah,
changing.
I don't know where it's going, but it's going to be a fun ride. Yeah,
Dave, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. It's been a pleasure to talk to you about all this stuff. Uh,
absolutely.
it's yeah, wonderful to have you on. Before we go, I'd like to thank my executive producer Martika Ibarra, our editor Robert, and the entire Architects of Imagination cast. Check us out on YouTube, everywhere you get good podcasts, Apple, Spotify, and thanks for watching Architects of Imagination. Till next time. Yeah, I'm gonna hit the stop button now.